All right, this video is going to be a review of factoring, and there are a few different types of factoring that we're going to review, and we're just going to do a couple of them today because I don't want to overwhelm you by going over too many too fast. So, and these names, some of them are kind of like what they're always called, and some of them are not. So I'm going to just write that this is trinomials. Trinomials, yep, I spelled that right. And this isn't going to make any sense to you right now, but we're still going to write it because it will make sense to you in the future. And I'm going to say A equals 1. This is the first type of factoring we're going to look at. And so the instructions for any of these, they would say factor, or they might say factor completely. So for the first one, we're going to factor x squared plus 4x minus 12, and this should be review. I'm not teaching you to factor for the first time. You guys learned that already, Math 1, 8th grade maybe. So here, whenever we factor trinomials, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to the number on the end and add to the number in the middle. So I'm looking for, and I always organize my information like this. You don't have to, it's just what I like to do. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to a negative 12, but add to a positive 4. And if you are not great at your multiplication tables, if you have a hard time with those, your calculator can actually help you with this because your calculator can give you all of your options. So, sorry, I'm trying to make this so it's not glare, not giving a glare. So what you do to look at all the options that multiply to negative 12 is you type the y equals button on your calculator, and then you're going to type negative 12 divided by x. And when you do that, sorry, I'm going to focus a little bit more there. There we go. When you do that, if you hit second graph and look at the table has all of the options. So these are all pairs that multiply to negative 12. And now you can look at which ones add together to be 4. So 1 plus negative 12 is negative 11. 2 plus negative 6 is negative 4. 3 plus negative 4 is negative 1. 4 plus negative 3 is positive 1. 5, I'm not even going to do that one because that's a decimal. And then 6 plus negative 2, that one equals 4. And so those are the numbers. So if you're not feeling comfortable with your multiplication skills, you can still do this. So x plus 6, x minus 2. And then you stop and you say, okay, those are my factors. All right. For the next example, we'll say x squared minus 13x plus 40. So I'm going to say, okay, what are the two numbers that multiply to 40 but add to a negative 13? So if I was doing this on my calculator to help me, I would say 40 divided by x, and then I would look at the table. And if I look at the table, all of these add to positive numbers. 1 plus 40 is 41, 2 plus 20 is 22. Ignore that one because it's got a decimal. 4 plus 10 is 14. 5 plus 8 is positive 13. And I keep going and I just get decimals, and then I get 13 again, decimals and more decimals, but none of them are right. And that's because I'm looking at all the positive values. So I should go the opposite way because two negative numbers also can multiply to be a positive 40. But this time, if I look at negative numbers, now they're going to add to a negative sum. So negative 41, negative 22, decimal, I'm ignoring that. Negative 14, I'll keep going, and there we go. Negative 5 and negative 8 gives you a negative 13. Now, one question students often ask is, does the order matter? So if I wrote negative 5 and negative 8, and you wrote negative 8 and negative 5, who's correct? And the answer is both of us. You can write it in whichever order and you still get the answer right. Okay, let's try another one. let's do x squared plus 3x minus 54. So we're finding two numbers that multiply to negative 54, but add to 3. And so I'm going to press y equals two numbers that multiply to negative 54 and add to 3. And I actually don't even need to scroll because it's on the screen right now. So take a moment, see if you can figure out which pair it is on the screen. So it's the negative 6 and the positive 9. They multiply to a negative 54, but they add to a positive 3. So x minus 6, x plus 9. Okay. So now I want to show you another type. And this one is called difference of squares. Difference of squares. And I'm going to show you, oops, don't write that yet. We're going to do that in a second. I'm going to show you some really simple ones first, and then in class, we're going to use what we figure out from that. We'll do some more complicated ones. Okay, so here's our first example. X squared minus 36. So the interesting part about this, you might notice, is that it's not a trinomial. You can think like tricycle. Trinomials have 3 parts. So tricycle, triangle, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All of these had 3 parts. When we do difference of squares, they don't have 3 parts. They're binomials. They only have 2 parts. But we're going to do them the same way that we did the previous problems, at least to start with. So this problem I'm going to rewrite. It's missing that middle term with the x. And if it's missing the term, the only way that term could have been written so that you don't even have to write it at all, the only number that could have been in front of that x for that to happen is it could have had a 0. And if that x had a 0 in front of it, then you actually don't have to write it at all. It just disappears. So we can do the same thing now. We can say what multiplies to negative 36 but adds to 0. So we have to find two numbers that multiply to negative 36, but they have to be the same number. They have to add to 0. So negative 36 divided by x. Two numbers, they have to be the same, but they have to be opposite signs because they have to add to 0. So the two numbers are negative 6 and positive 6. Okay, let's try another one. X squared minus 81. So again, I'm going to rewrite it like a trinomial so that I can use my little rule, the x thing that I've been doing. So I rewrote it. I put the 0 term in there for the middle one. So now I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 81 and add to 0. So two numbers that multiply to negative 81 but add to 0. I don't see any numbers on here. Okay, so the two numbers that would add to 0 would be negative 9 and positive 9. So x minus 9, x plus 9. Okay, let's try another one. If I did x squared minus 16, so the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite it. X squared plus 0x minus 16. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 16, but add to 0. And two numbers that multiply to negative 16 are 4 and 4, negative 4 and positive 4. So x minus 4, x plus 4. Okay, so that is difference of squares. So those are the two that we're going to focus on to start with. And then we'll practice those tomorrow, and then we'll learn about some other ones.